This is a global original podcast. Hello, my name is Gordon Glenister. Welcome to Influence, the global podcast that shines a spotlight on the influencer marketing industry. I'm the co-founder of BCMA Influence, which is a professional membership association that represents the influencer marketing industry. And my objective is to interview some of the most interesting people in the world of influencer marketing. And in the next 30 minutes, get real insights, ideas and tips to help you better understand the fascinating world of influence. So today we're going to be talking to two industry heavyweights from the world of PR and influencer marketing. Francis Ingham is the Director General of the Public Relations and Communications Association, and Scott Guthrie is an award-winning blogger, and he's also a board member of the BCMA Influencer Steering Group. I often get asked the question where the role of PR sits in relation to influencer marketing. Let's be honest, marketing and PR have always had this sort of complicated relationship. You know, some traditional marketeers and publicists will say that the differences are very clear, pointing to advertising versus awareness and revenue driving versus brand building. But as the lines between media and advertising have blurred, so too have the lines between marketing and PR. This has been very true for PR and influencer marketing, particularly given the large role that PR agencies play, indeed in facilitating collaborations. So the relationship is almost now interlinked. So wanted to get an idea from our first guest about his perspective on this. So that is Francis Ingham, who heads up the PRCA, which is the world's largest PR professional body. In fact, it's got something like 30,000 practitioners and now operating in 66 countries around the world.
So PRCA is the largest association for PR practitioners in the world, and we have members in 66 countries. We opened in Buenos Aires only last month, for example. And what we do is we set professional standards, we raise professional development, we have a rigorously enforced code of conduct that guarantees the ethical practice of our members, and we operate as the voice of the industry. I've been in the role for the last 12 years. We've grown in every year of that leadership. 2020 might be the exception to that. But I think we provide a very powerful voice for our profession, and that's something that I think the profession needs.
So how did you get into it yourself?
I guess my first PR role was I was the PR manager, voluntary role for the Oxford Union Society. So I used to handle the visits of famous speakers and variously did that and guest liaison with them, which was an interesting job to have with some people with enormous egos. You might say prepared me for this job. I worked for the Conservative Party as a political campaigner, and then public affairs, a few years at the CIPR, and then the last 12 years at the PRCA. And I think one of the reasons I enjoy the job is that I understand what PR people do. I happen to like PR people, which I think is very helpful. I still keep my hand in selling in stories in the media, doing the interviews and writing press releases.
Presumably, though, you've seen quite a lot of change in those 12 years. What's been some of the trends that you've noticed in the industry at large?
Well, I mean, I think the last 12 years have been remarkable in terms of continued growth. I joined the PRC just before the financial crash, and that was a brave move in retrospect. And I remember at that point in time, people talking about what was going to happen to the industry. Would it be in, a spiral of decline? And of course, that didn't happen. So that gives me confidence for the future. In terms of the trends, I'd say the shift in spend away from big budget advertising campaigns and towards more flexible PR campaigns. PR practitioners offering a far wider range of services than they did before. Chief execs investing more in their corporate reputation when they see what happens when corporate reputation goes wrong. Companies and chief execs screw it up. But predominantly, I guess, just the continued rise of digital. I remember when I was at the CIPR, my then boss, who was a great boss, Colin Farrington, said that social media was a blip. And of course, that has proved to be far from the truth. It has redefined our industry and the society and business and economy with which it operates. And it's proved a powerful driver for growth, both in the UK and all around the world.
And so what do you think, obviously we're coming out of lockdown, I mean, what do you think are some of the lessons that the industry will have learned? Keeping simple messages repeated all the time is at the forefront, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, we had very little during the lockdown period than communications, really. And it's proved the enormous power of the spoken and the written word, I guess. People who have no interest in politics, whom I know on my team and just socially, have rigorously tuned in to the daily press conference because they've wanted to hear what the government has to say. You think about the Queen's broadcast to the country, the massive number of people who tuned in to that. And yeah, the simplicity of messaging, those three simple messages that the government decided upon reasonably early in the process, have proved incredibly powerful, listened to, acted upon by people. One might say acted upon to a far greater extent than the government expected or wished from some of the political friends I speak with. So yeah, it has absolutely proved the value and the centrality of communications. Yeah. And I can't see that going away.
Yeah. I mean, and how do you see that sort of communication style translating into more corporate business? Do you think there's going to be a new normal, for example, in the way that we communicate?
Well, I think what it's done, I mean, if you ignore the government for a moment, some companies have had a good crisis, so to speak, haven't they? And some have really not had a good one. So I won't highlight the bad ones because that's unfair, but I think we all know what they are. Airlines asking for bailouts when they previously said bailouts are for wimps, basically. You think of Admiral giving people a discount when they really didn't have to on their insurance premiums. Yeah. They've come out of this pretty well. Some of the companies that are continuing to pay dividends and yet they're still asking for public sector support, they haven't done so well. And what I think it speaks to is people expect companies to be about something more than just money. People expect companies and their chief execs to be authentic. And I think the companies that have come through this with authenticity have shown the value of being true to your brand, really.
Absolutely. Well, that's quite an interesting word because we often associate that word with the word of influencer marketing.
Yes.
Those that have really done well are those that are authentic and genuine. And I've actually been talking to a lot of my sort of influencers. This is a time to build audience and build engagement. So even if brand advertising has been somewhat reduced, you're connecting with your audience perhaps at a time and a degree of intensity that you might not have been able to before, which isn't a bad thing.
To a certain extent, it is a perfect time to communicate with your audience, isn't it? Because, we all have more time on our hands. We're all desperate to hear messages, ideally positive ones. But there's also the flip side, of course, that it's very easy to make a mess of it. Harry and Meghan, what world do they inhabit? The introspection, the me element has been remarkable. And so I think it's, it's an ideal opportunity for brands and companies and influencers to make a mark for themselves It's a question of whether that mark is a good one or a bad one, because it's a defining moment for lots of companies and brands.
Well, I know we were having a conversation before about we'll remember the people that stood by us during this period, won't we? And we'll remember those that didn't. And that, of course, goes to the employees as well. I think as well. The people that have supported the company through difficult times, and those that have, quite frankly, haven't.
I think it cuts both ways. During lockdown, there was a piece published by Rubin Sinclair, the recruitment company, and we had helped them do this, put it in front of employees, and it asked a variety of questions about how your employer treated you, what is the impact of this. And there's a really clear impact of, people who said, they treated me well, it's increased my loyalty, and vice versa. And of course, the same goes for, as an employer, looking at the people who have risen to the challenge and the people who haven't. And the blunt, hard number reality is that there are going to be more people unemployed at the end of this year than at the beginning of the year. And the industry is going to be smaller. It's resilient and it will recover, but it is going to be smaller because the economy is going to be smaller. And both employers and employees are going to have to make decisions, just as consumers are, frankly.
On that note, I mean, how would you define true influence?
It's the power to change people's decisions, I suppose, whether for in a good manner or in a negative manner. And we're seeing plenty of it at the moment. And this will, I presume, be when influencer marketing really, really takes off, because we're all seeing the importance and the relevance of it right now.
And how do you see that the PR world and the influencer marketing world working in tandem?
Yeah, well, I would say that my PR colleagues, they see it in the way that they used to see digital and social, if I could put it this way. For years, we said there are plenty of PR companies that know that digital has to be at the heart of everything they do, but they don't quite understand it. So they're kind of faltering around trying to find their way. And of course, now they have found their way, and it's reaped dividends for all of them. I think lots of our colleagues in PR still are a little bit uncertain as to how to engage with influencers. And they, we see it when it goes right and we see it when it goes wrong, but it will shine a spotlight on this area, doubtless, what's happening at the moment. And I would say shine a spotlight for the better.
Who influences you then?
It's a very interesting question. No one's ever asked me that. So I left home at 16 and went to live in a hostel in the city of Manchester, which was an eye-opening 3 years, a place full of violence and drugs, and not the sort of people you want to live with. And got into Oxford whilst there, and then went to a very different atmosphere than the place I'd left, and with no financial support from home at all. I think my mother, during the 3 years I was there, gave me 20 quid, and that was the totality of it. I've always been quite self-resilient, I suppose. And I mean, the people who in my career influenced me would be close political mates, none of whom are famous to any extent at all. But it's, I guess my attitude to life is a bit like Lord Chadlington's, whose motto is never give up. That will be an attitude that will see our industry to a better place than it is in at the moment.
So if you were being the questionnaire of yourself, what would you be asking you right now?
I would ask, how serious an issue is COVID-19 for the PR industry? And I'd say that, speaking with members, the current crisis that we're in is going to see a lot of redundancies. And I expect that when we are at its nadir, we'll be about 30% smaller than we were at the beginning of this, and that we will end the year about 15% smaller. But if there are silver linings, it's shown the importance of communication, particularly in times of crisis. It's probably accelerated the industry's shift to a virtual and a digital environment, and that again plays to its strengths. And the companies and the organisations that are resilient will approve that and will prosper going forward.
This podcast is supported by the Branded Content Marketing Association. Our aim is to promote the value of influencer marketing globally. Next, I wanted to get a perspective on the different types of influence. And so who better to ask than industry expert Scott Guthrie. Scott Guthrie is a well-renowned influencer marketing consultant and guest blogger, is that right?
Yes, I am. Yeah, thank you very much, Gordon. Yeah, what am I? I'm a strategic influencer marketing consultant. I'm a kind of a media commentator, and I've been nominated for the third year running by Velio as a top 10 PR blogger. So,
yeah, that's brilliant. That's excellent. And of course, you also sit on the BCMA influencer steering group, and you've been there right at the start, I think, isn't that right?
Yes, I found a member alongside you, Gordon. Yes, the industry, very much needs a council or a steering committee or whatever we're calling it. And yes, I mean it's a slow progress, but that's because it's kind of a first of a kind.
Yeah, no, indeed. And I think it leads us into what do you understand by the word influence? It had so many different connotations. What would you best describe it as?
Okay, well, I'll separate the two between influence and influencer, and I would say that to have influence is the ability to affect a change in others. It's to have the ability to form or to change an opinion in other people, to alter behaviours, and so that influence is usually context specific. So Jeremy Clarkson, he's renowned throughout the world. Top Gear, and now he's on Amazon Prime. He knows everything about cars. He knows how to drive them. He knows all the different models of them. I wouldn't trust him to mend my car. So it's about domain authority. And similarly with Jamie Oliver, he's written 20 plus cookbooks. He's been on 20 or 30 television programs about how to cook. But we saw with the demise of Jamie's Italian restaurant chain that his domain authority is on cooking and cookbooks and TV and entertainment. It is not in running businesses associated and restaurants associated. So influence is sort of domain specific, context specific, but it's the ability to change a behaviour or alter a person's opinion. An influence, on the other hand, an influence is becoming more and more a pejorative term. The media likes to sort of have a downer on influencers. And influencers themselves like to call themselves content creators increasingly. But I'm going to stick with the umbrella term of an influencer. And I think there's a note of caution here. An influencer is often used interchangeably with the term brand advocate. But influence is neutral. You can have influencers that are good for the brand and influencers that have a negative impact. Influencers are change agents. They may hurt as much as they may help the communicator's cause, rather. And advocates are supporters. They're people, often customers, who talk favourably about a product. They don't necessarily hold power. They don't have power to influence, but I think it's important to remember influencers can have, they're change agents. That doesn't necessarily mean they're advocates. Advocates are supporters. That doesn't necessarily mean they have influence.
So something like Greta Thunberg, for example, has been and still is hugely influential, but not necessarily something that you would associate with an influencer marketing campaign.
No, and again, so in this context, or an influencer or a social media influencer is kind of someone that's kind of born and lives. Their influence lives on social media. It lives in Instagram or on YouTube or on TikTok increasingly. So Greta might well have, and I haven't checked the stats, might have a colossal following on Instagram, but she's not really known for her Instagram presence. She's known for taking political leaders to task and trying to affect a change. So she's influential for sure, affect a a change in climate change.
I mean, I was just doing some research recently about COVID, for example, one of the most influential people that's been searched online is the Director General of the World Health Organization, as you probably would imagine, because of the time and now and the place that we're all in. So what do you think are some of the platforms that various influencers tend to use?
Well, again, I mean, we've always had we've always had influencers. We've always been influenced by people. So hundreds of years ago, it was the nobility and it was the church. Hundreds of years ago, or 100 years ago plus, it was journalists and government officials. Latterly, it was analysts. We've always had these third parties that wave or garner influence, and the platforms that they use are the platforms where the audiences are. So if you're trying to reach sort of a greying population, it might well be free to air terrestrial television. If you're trying to tap into Gen Z and millennials, they don't watch the telly. You'll find them on Instagram, you'll find them on TikTok, you'll find them on YouTube. So it depends, what platform you use. It depends on what audience you're trying to engage with. So, Instagram is very image dominant. It's picture-led. Twitter is very immediate. It's short-form blogging, isn't it? You can get out a message very, very quickly. You can ask a question. You can tag it, journo request, and you'll be sure to get 101 offers of PRs and brands trying to offer assistance or get a quote into a journalist piece. And likewise, when there is a message to throw out, journalists are used to writing in the written word. They're used to be able to throw out bits of content, and Twitter really suits that format. Instagram is very visual, and so it's no massive surprise that the top three verticals for sponsored content are fashion and beauty and pictures of food and drink.
And how do you think influencers changed over the years?
Well, I think, and again, it's probably a bit tasteless to find a positive in the coronavirus, but I think this pandemic has given an opportunity for our industry to recalibrate. I think that sometime in the not too distant past, we got a bit lost, and we started to celebrate the popularity. We started to sort of celebrate, big follower numbers, and we created content that was likely to garner a lot of likes and a lot of engagement. Now we're kind of returning back to the subject matter expertise and the quality of storytelling. This is the theme that hopefully will come back. It's kind of purpose-led content that really helps a distinct community. And and an influencer, I think is a community curator or a community guardian. They listen very carefully to what their audience likes and what it doesn't like. They look very carefully at the data behind how a post has performed. They look at the sentiment of the comments being produced, and then they obviously produce more of the content that audience likes, and remove the sort of content that going forward that their audience doesn't like. So hopefully we'll move away from sort of this clickbaity and first posting where influencers create content just for likes and for comments, and they'll create more thoughtful, more rounded content.
I mean, do you see this as a move towards the more professional influencer in terms of the trends that we're getting? Do you see the growth coming in the people that are doing, suggesting some of the things that you were saying is looking at the analytics behind their post, looking at the timing of when they post, and they're really understanding their audience better than ever?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And if you think about, or you look at the influencers in the last 6 weeks that have really caught the imagination of the mainstream media and the consumer, they're the ones that have put the community at the heart of what they do. So you have Joe Wicks, who has kind of been an overnight success that's been 4 or 5 years in the making. He's gone ballistic. It's kind of part of the UK primary school curriculum now.
Yeah.
But he's been creating that sort of content day after day after day after day, religiously on Instagram and now on YouTube. So it's not a new phenomenon, but he has reacted to the needs of the nation, if you like, and he's creating more content. But he's not alone. You have Dr. Ranj Singh, who he was on Strictly Come Dancing. He was a CBBC children's doctor, but he's still a practicing doctor at St George's over in Tooting. He has a colossal following on Instagram, and he is able to sort of translate NHS speak and government speak and turn that into a language that his followers understand. And so so again, it's community first. But yes, you're absolutely right. As the industry matures, there kind of increasingly two bands of influencers: those that are sort of amateur and those that are trying to professionalize. And the ones that are trying to professionalize are those that are trying to put, that are increasingly looking to influencer marketing as their main form of income. And so, of course, it's beholden upon them to make themselves look in the best possible light to prospective brands. And how do you do that? You put together a decent media kit. You use real-time statistics and data within that media kit, and you can demonstrate, you don't just say you're good, you demonstrate you're good by past endeavours.
I mean, I've heard the word pivot quite a lot during this process, as I'm sure you have.
Pivoted, unprecedented. They're the two words that have come out time and time again. Yeah.
But it's also a period of what I call brand trial for people that haven't considered influencer marketing, to perhaps trial something even in a small way, because although it's one of the fastest growing advertising media, there are still a lot of brands that don't use influencer marketing, but perhaps through the COVID situation that we're now in, they'll be more likely to invest in it. So do you think this is quite a good time for people to trial out content and experience and even do some pro bono stuff?
Yes, I think so, and absolutely, our industry is increasing almost exponentially year on year. I wrote an article yesterday featuring the work, and hopefully I'll get her name right, but Asma El Badawi, who is a British Sudanese woman, an athlete, an advocate, a spoken word poet, and I mention this because she put together, with her talent manager at the Fifth, they put together a 2-minute video of her spoken words poetry, with some amazing London cityscape footage, intercut with some drone work of her in isolation, just practicing basketball as part of her permitted exercise regime. And all of the production costs were about 250 quid, and it was, it wouldn't have been out of place as a Nike ad on television or at the cinema. And and the drone was brought up Curry's PC World. The cityscape footage were taken of empty streets, were taken by a photographer on his bicycle as he was going around as part of his permitted exercise. Her next door neighbour took some of the footage as well. And it was put together in a matter of days. Obviously, nobody could meet in an editing suite, so the files were transferred digitally between different parties. And so what have you got here? You've got fleet of foot, you've got relatability, you've got low production costs, and you've got speed of turnaround. If I wanted to produce a television ad, I wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah.
You can't go out and film on location. You can't get it into the editing suite. You can't get access to sort of front and back, behind camera talent. What are you going to do? So I think it's not quite answering your question, Gordon, but I think now is a great opportunity because of all those things I've mentioned, and also it's an opportunity to test and learn what works and what doesn't work. But it has to be well thought through. It has to be part of a strategy rather than let's have a little play at this. It has to be part of If you are test and learning, what are the takeaways? What are you measuring? How will you improve that next time?
But it's another reason, actually, for people to work with professional influencer marketing platforms, agencies, and specialists that can actually guide people through this process, isn't it?
I think that's true. Absolutely, you need to sign up with the good guys, but also you need to know who those good guys are. And you need to sort of invest in a little bit of learning yourself, of knowing what questions to ask of these platforms, to ask these agencies. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers. Yeah. And ours is a young industry, and it's enjoying many, many growth spurts, but it's also enduring some growing pains as well. There are lots of great guys, and we sit on the influencer steering group with the good guys. But there are also some bad actors as well. So, brands have to make sure that they are at least knowledgeable enough to know what questions to ask. And but yes, if you tap into the right guys, the right agencies, the right platforms, they'll be able to steer you on a journey of what to ask and what to expect from an influencer marketing strategy. And to talk again about this short film that I wrote about with Asma El Badawi, she is a poet, for sure. She's a basketball player. She's an activist. She's a playwright.
It's incredible.
But she's also, she also makes films, and it's not just just picking up a smartphone and testing and learning it. She also has the experience backed up with academic rigor. So she has a BA Hons in photography and in video and digital imaging, and a master's in visual arts. So sort of a cost collapse in technology has enabled us all to be able to have access to smartphones and access to drones from Curry's PC World, or whatever. But we also need to be able to have a little bit of guidance and a bit of academic sort of rigor to be able to get the best out of these tools as well.
I'm just quite keen to hear from you about some of the tips that you might want to give an up-and-coming influencer that's got a modest audience but wants to grow it quite substantially. What are the sort of takeaway tips that you'd like to give to them?
I guess know your audience. Know what your audience likes and what your audience doesn't like. That means knowing the data behind your profile. That means knowing where your audience lives. Are they, if you're in the UK, is most of your audience in the UK? What is the gender? What are the age groups? Those sorts of things. Have a clear point of view. I don't think, I think the time of sort of trying to super please everybody by sort of being really bland are over. And now is the time to have a clear point of view, have a clear look. It's not about aping the Kardashians. It's about having your own identity, your own values, your own point of view. And I think when you work with brands, only work with the brands that you care about. When you're just starting off and a brand approaches you and is willing to pay for your content, then it's very easy to become seduced by that and just quickly snap that opportunity up. But is that the right? Is that brand the right partnership with for you? And is it the right partnership for your audience as well? So do you believe in that product that you're selling? Will your audience call you a sellout if you work with that brand? I would also say, know the disclosure rules and the regulations in your jurisdiction.
Of course.
So, as we know, in the UK, it's the ASA and the CMA. In the US, it's the FTC. Know what the rules are. Know who the governing bodies are in your jurisdiction, and just follow lots of similar influencers and similar content creators, and see how the industry is evolving, and see how you can help professionalize that industry as well, and help the industry grow with you.
So that's it for another edition of Influence. Please don't forget to subscribe and let us have your feedback, and any questions that you've got, just drop me a line of feedback@influencepodcast.net, or you can go on to the BCMA website, which is www.thebcma.info. You can also send me a message on my Instagram, which is Gordon Glenister. And if you feel like it, please don't hesitate to give us a 5-star review, because it would be awesome and it really helps us. Thanks to my producer Neil Whiteside of Freedom One. So from me, Gordon Glenister, it's bye for now.